Welcome back, my petals, my loves. Welcome to today's video. We are discussing the curse of the Pharaoh. Such a fascinating topic, but not probably for a reason that you may not think. Anyway. Before I start the video today, I would like to first give a shout out to what has become a mutual of mine, the Egyptology guy on TikTok. If you don't know this story because you don't follow me on TikTok already, I'll explain it at later points in the video, but he is an Egyptologist and he just deserves a shout out. So go check him out on TikTok while you're checking me out on TikTok, If you're new to my channel, welcome. We discuss history here. We also do vlogs and, well, just whatever as well. So thank you for being here. Please consider subscribing because, that makes me happy. And also helps me potentially make more content because I don't have to do as much. It just helps, okay? Do I really have to explain why I want you to subscribe to my channel? So first, let me tell you the tale, okay? This all stems back to when Tutankhamen's tomb was found by Howard Carter back in 1922, I believe it was. So when Howard Carter found Tutankhamen's tomb, it caused this insane Egyptomania phenomenon that we've seen in the past before, but people were just loving anything that they could get that was Egyptian or ancient Egyptian of any description, right? And so these weird and wacky things started happening. Now, Tutankhamen was a young pharaoh, one of the last pharaohs in the 18th dynasty, and his reign lasted under 10 years. He was very young when he died. Now, in Egypt's Valley of the Kings, there is a lot of the royal tombs. Whilst King Tutankhamun's short reign was not forgotten, his tomb was forgotten, which was one of the reasons why the finding of his tomb is so interesting, is because grave robbers or tomb raiders had not gotten to his tomb. So that's why it is such a famous, he is now, in these times, such a famous pharaoh, because we have a lot of information about his burial because his tomb was literally just skipped over by tomb raiders. And a lot of these other pharaohs that were extremely significant back in the Egyptian times, most modern day people may not even recognize their name. Now, after 5 years of excavating in the Valley of the Kings, Howard Carter and his team finds Tutankhamun's tomb. Now, as the tale goes, there's an Egyptian inscription upon the tomb, as the tale goes, that says something like, "Do not disturb if you want to stay alive," along those vibes. And so upon opening it, it was said that a curse was brought upon anyone involved with the removing of the king. So then some weird stuff started happening, such as Lord, I can never say his name, Carnarvon, the financier of the archaeological dig, dies. Supposedly, when he came to visit the tomb, he was bitten on the face by a mosquito, which got terribly infected, and then he died of a mosquito bite, essentially, which that was the first thing. Now, as the tale goes, over the next 5 to 10 years, every single person that was involved in this dig is starting to die in mysterious ways. And at least 3 of them were reported to have a state of paralysis, and then they would slowly die. And it even in different reports that I was reading stated that like 1 person lived to old age, being Howard Carter himself. Now from this, scientists had studied pathogens, fungi, like what could have caused this possible mass death of all these people, but it was widely believed that the curse was real, that this curse of Tutankhamun's tomb was real, and that we shouldn't have opened it. Like, stories are crazy. There's like this one guy who received a paperweight which happened to be Tutankhamun's mummified hand that apparently had a bracelet on it with like the inscription like you know, you'll die or whatever, and like his house burned down and then his house flooded. So the media were going crazy on this. Like it was Egyptomania. It was mania. That is the best way to describe it, because to this day there is so much information out there stating that this is fact and that this happened, and that we still don't know to this day like why the curse is the way that the curse is. So, fact or fiction? So this story of the curse, as I was so myself educated on, the entire concept is almost entirely pop culture because of these news outlets back in British and American, you know, 18 to 1900 tabloids. The millions of texts surviving from ancient Egypt, a handful of them even mention curses. And if they were found in tombs, they were typically found in non-royal tombs back from the Old Kingdom, which was about 1,000 years before King Tut even lived, let alone died. So the first myth that's very widely held, like I can find copious amounts of what appears to be pretty reliable sources stating that there was an inscription on King Tut's tomb. There was no inscription. As the Egyptologist that I tagged at the beginning of the video educated myself on this, this myth was invented by 1920 journalists and tabloids, and then was just spread like wildfire, and then everyone just believed that there was an inscription. They were getting, these news tabloid journalist people were getting amazing response, so they needed more. They needed more to do with the curses. So what they would do is they take photos from the tombs of these inscriptions, and they would basically translate them to show curses, but they literally had no way of reading the Egyptian writing. They knew that in the 1920s, literally no one would be able to fact check or proofread the incorrect translation. So they just said whatever the hell they wanted to say. They were like, yeah, this says that you're gonna die a slow death, blah, 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 blah. It was like completely fabricated. Death shall come on swift wings to he who disturbs the tomb of the king. Total bullshit. Didn't exist. Now, the other myth, which I have casually sported as fact in the past, because it still to this day is a myth that is circulated, was that all the excavators died, which is completely false. About 6 people died in the next decade, and then the excavators died later because, you know, because people die. So that's a lie as well. So the financier and the relative, I forget his name, they did die, but it was like 5 to 6 years later. It was not from the mosquito bite thing. And then all these other people that died that the tabloids were like, it's because of the curse, like literally never went to Tut's tomb. Like they may have just happened to have lived in Egypt or happened to have been Egyptian. It was fake. It was just fake news. So where did the concept of the curse come from in the first place? So basically when Howard Carter excavated King Tut's tomb, the press were all over it like a rash. It was one of the biggest historical events, you know, in a while. And so Howard Carter gave them a story that a curse had been placed, but it got sensationalized by the press, when in reality I think he probably just wanted people to stay away from the archaeological site and not visit. Then it expanded to not just Tutankhamen, but all the royal tombs, that they all held a curse. And we think that it was really just the archaeologists' way of trying to stop people from going there and ruining the history sites. And the press just took it way too far. So, Pharaoh's tombs curse, fact or fiction? Completely fiction. I do, however, think it's very important to have a look at Egyptomania, which is kind of this concept of, you know, ancient artifacts having these like supernatural cursings and all of this sort of stuff. We see it so much through the the 1800s and the 1900s in Europe and America. Now, obviously at this point, like there was not a lot of people that could read Egyptian. Rosetta Stone, which is an artifact that contained hieroglyphics, Egyptian, what we kind of as non-Egyptologists probably assume is like the normal writing, which is really like a decorative, more like I think religious, or anyway. So on the Rosetta Stone, it wasn't until it was deciphered until we were able to like read ancient Egyptian, right? And it took years for this to be deciphered. It wasn't until 1822 there was Thomas Young and a couple of other people that deciphered this. And so then from that point forward, being able to read Egyptian and these texts and things started to become something that was possible. So 100 years later, not a lot of people at all were familiar with the hieroglyphs or ancient Egyptian anything. Now, this is not the only sort of deception that takes place around these 1800 times. Like I said, Egyptomania and religious fever was taking place in America and in other parts of the world as well. If you're ever interested, Google the Great Awakening, which essentially took place in America. It was like this religious fever, you know, because people were coming from these countries like where they had to be Catholic or they'd be killed, or Protestant or they'd be killed, and they're coming to America and they were able to believe whatever they wanted to believe. Now, at that same time, all this Egyptomania was taking place. There were literally people selling bodies or just Egyptian artifacts that had been just stolen from Egypt. So there's many evidences of people taking books of the dead, which we know now are very common, and it is a very when someone was mummified, they were buried with a book of the dead, which is kind of like their in my own words, how the Egyptians believed would guide the spirit through the realms of the spirit world. And so we have these moments in the 1800s where Americans would find these artifacts and then translate them and say that they were about like Judeo-Christian figures, about God and about Abraham and all this sort of stuff. And then, you know, today when we have the internet and people that read hieroglyphs have been able to compare the pair and show just how incorrect it all was. So that was kind of the environment at the time. There's a lot of myth that is still around. To be honest, the actual history of ancient Egypt is far more interesting anyway than the hearsay, just in my opinion. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you learned something. If you've got any questions, please comment below and I will, when you guys ask me questions, it gives me ideas for other videos and yeah, all that sort of stuff. If you want to go back and watch my TikToks, you might have to scroll quite a way back because I covered Egypt a while ago, but it's just at taniberlo. And again, if you want to dive deep into ancient Egypt, we are doing that on the Patreon starting this month, and we have a lot to get through. I'm just going to show you, this is the condensed version of the curriculum right now. Like, I've cut that down significantly. It's just, there's just so much. So on the Patreon, I mean, you can go to my page and you can learn about what we do there. But yeah, feel free to subscribe because we are going to be doing that. I will see you soon. All my love.